House of the Dragon Season 1 aired almost exactly 1 year ago. It's safe to say that the prequel to Game of Thrones was a huge success, but how good was it really? I invited my friend Eric from the Grease Goblins to discuss the show's strongest and weakest moments so far. Enjoy! House of the Dragon Season 1, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess. Doesn't really work. But
Yeah.
so let's split this one into the good and the bad. If you think about House of the Dragon Season 1 in terms of what worked, what's coming to mind?
So right off the bat, I think the thing that worked the best was I think the characters really interacted well. The characters' growth throughout a lot of the season was really good. There was some hitches here and there, but I think just towards the average show nowadays, this had some of the best writing, character writing specifically. There were some other choices with the plot that we'll probably talk about at this video at some point. I think the major thing that I kind of took away from the first season, looking at it, all the way back now for back then, is I think 90% of the show was, really good. And a lot of the little things they did really well. But it was like that 10% that we're going to talk about. And it
Mm.
was something that the 10% usually was not like the minor scenes, the small stuff. It was usually the big stuff. And I think that's something that I took away from the first season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think those 10% that you mentioned there, usually those were the scenes that ended the episodes, the big shocking moments, things that they made up because they probably thought that the audience was too bored with all of the character stuff. So that is something that they've been worrying about a lot, I think, when they created the series. How do you structure uh, this show? How do you introduce the audience to the characters without them getting confused? And you have decades that you kind of have to get to. George R. R. Martin actually wanted to start with Jaehaerys and Balon and Aemon, which would also be a logical choice. I mean, it pushes it kind of a little,
Yeah.
the time jump, and we're gonna get into that as well, I think. But
Yep.
it's kind of crazy to think about.
I think there's absolutely no chance if we were gonna have 10 episodes that you could have done that.
Oh
They
yeah,
just
nowhere, no way.
you would have had to have way more episodes, which I think the first season still needed. I think it needed
Mm.
like, maybe an episode or two, especially around the time when Harwin and Rhaenyra get together.
Yeah,
I feel like there was a lot missing that we just didn't get to see.
yeah,
I thought that was something, but yeah. I mean, George has got some ideas, but
definitely, definitely.
I don't know if it would have worked.
So let's get to the good stuff before we get into all that Harwin stuff.
Yeah.
The time jump obviously was a huge issue for a lot of people. But the thing that I appreciated the most about House of the Dragon was that it took the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, and it just reintroduced us to complexity when it comes to
Hmm.
this world. The dialogue's been way better. That was something that I was very happy about right from the get go in episode one. Like, the way Daemon and Viserys talked in the throne room, that was very, these people don't talk like modern people anymore, which they definitely
Yep.
did sometimes on the OG show.
I thought it was just at least an attempt to return to what made like, especially like say the first season of Game of Thrones, because the first season of Game of Thrones, there wasn't a lot of action. It was a lot of people sitting in rooms having conversations and
Yeah.
the political intrigue. I mean, think about the one of the biggest scenes that stands out from the first season of Game of Thrones is just between Cersei and Ned when Ned reveals he knows what's up.
Mm.
That's something I think that House of the Dragon, for the most part, did pretty well on. Sometimes it didn't always stick the lane, but for the most part, it did a really good job of that aspect of it. I think for me, one of my favorite scenes from the first season was just something as simple as like Alicent when she now is fully embraced like the green dress from I think it was like episode 5, I believe,
Mm.
episode 4,
Yeah.
5.
Episode 5, the
And
wedding.
yeah, and that's a scene where it's like it's not a big spectacle scene, it's not a battle, it's not the dragons, it's just something it's a completion of kind of the first part of Allison's arc.
I think when it comes to the characters, they've done a great job most of the times. A lot of people, and we're gonna get into that later as well,
Yeah.
wanted more agency of characters like Alicent. But just in general, if you think about the job that they had to do with all these characters, setting them up for obviously the dance to begin in season 2, I think they've done a phenomenal job. You could have just had Viserys Targaryen die in the first episode of House of the Dragon and go from there and just show us the battles. I've said that many times, but I'm so glad that they didn't. You know, that would have
I agree.
been the easy thing, is just showing the war,
Yep.
just going in there. You know, episodes, I don't know, 4 is the killing of Viserys, and you go from there. Just spectacle. 2 seasons. Yoo-hoo.
Which is something I very much appreciate, like you said. But I think when you look at how this story is going to end, not getting into it and all that, but having this season is important to establish an emotional tie with all of these characters. So when we see, wherever they go, you're going to have some sort of connection with them,
Mm.
right? One of the best things that made Game of Thrones so good, and the Song of Ice and Fire as a whole, is your connection to these characters where you see yourself in them. So for me personally, Robb Stark. So the Red Wedding is something that really is something
Mm.
that hits hard, and that's something that House of the Dragon is now going to be able to do because they did take the time, even though maybe it was just a slower season compared to like the War, that is going to be better and be enhanced because of season one.
Yeah, something so seemingly small, like an old person walking into the throne room, had so much emotional weight. And now that is definitely one of my favorite scenes, not only in this show, but you can take the whole entirety of Game of Thrones and it would still be one of my
Yep.
favorite scenes. And that only was, they could only achieve that because of the scenes, the slower paced scenes, and the scenes where we really explore Viserys' character. And also, you really have to give them props, because if you compare it to the version we got in Fire and Blood, sure,
Night and day
it's,
difference.
yeah, definitely, it's crazy. Once
It
again,
is.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I agree. I mean, I think it for me personally is the best scene
Hmm.
of the first season. Now, I am someone that maybe is different. I think a lot of my favorite scenes are just the simple moments. Just like I already mentioned the Alicent one. I kind of, for me in the first season, veered a lot more towards, whether it's the council meetings, whether it's just, characters interacting more than like, oh, the dragon moments and things, which are good. And I think they
Hmm.
did a lot of great when it came to giving the dragons different qualities, right? It doesn't feel like Game of Thrones where it's like the dragons in Game of Thrones didn't really have any distinct qualities
Yeah,
over each other.
yeah, definitely. It feels more like a Song of Ice and Fire to me, and I know that's wild to say after one season. But we've spent years seeing, you know, Game of Thrones season 5, 6, and 7, and 8, and there wasn't even a resemblance of a Song of Ice and Fire in what we were watching. And right off the bat, even with the tourney, the way these people look, kings and queens wear crowns, like
Yep.
small stuff like that to me as a book fan is just very rewarding. And it was, oh, it was so good for the soul, man. Going
It
into
really
this,
was.
and the expectations weren't really high at that point, because well, it's a TV show, and
Hmm.
you know what they've done to the source material the last time around. And no, it's really, really good. You had a person there, in Ryan Condell, who really cares, and you
Yep.
could just feel that throughout the entire season.
I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, you can really tell in this first season that there was a lot of love and care put into it. Whereas I think the later seasons of Game of Thrones, you could tell that was not as apparent. Like the attention to detail is something that I think was, throughout, again, 90% of the show really good. And that's something that I think instills me with a lot of trust in the House of the Dragon team going forward. Is that, they had so many issues. I think season one easily should be the hardest season for them to make because of,
Yes.
everywhere we have to go with. I think this time period, especially with Fire and Blood, there's so many like gaps in history that we just don't know that you yourself have to basically create what you think happened. And I may have a different take than Ryan Connell does, but that's okay. As long as we get to the same endpoint and it makes sense, then we're all good. And I think I respect them a lot. I know on my channel I do like criticize House of the Dragon a lot, but it's because it's from a place of I want it to be as good as possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Totally get that. Just to get back to the comparison with Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones tried to achieve spectacle by doing big things, things that were visually pleasing, and big battles, and the Darth Maul on a reanimated dragon kind of thing. Um, Whereas again, to get back to Viserys walking into the throne room, spectacle was created by them making us care about these characters, and it's just very different, like the whole approach to it. And I think when it comes to the good stuff about House of the Dragon is that it really reignited my trust in HBO for making this possible, for
Agreed.
going for other shows and it actually being decent, being good. And yeah, it was just really, really good to return to complexity. And
Yep.
people were really there for the complexity. That is a very big lesson for HBO. They can actually take their time with this. They can actually make us wait for the big, important battles because they're gonna come anyway. And now it's more about adapting than it is about creating.
Yeah. And I think something that's really like great with that is, now that they can, you have this audience. People obviously want to see this show, and it's gained, I'd say, a pretty decent amount of traction, and not the same as like the early seasons of Game of Thrones
Mm.
and when it got to its heights, but still like really respectable. And so now you can kind of look at what worked in season one, what didn't work. And I think that's something that's going to really benefit the show going forward.
Definitely. And that kind of brings us to those bad points that we talked about. The 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 things they invented for shock value, that mostly
Yep.
just ended the episodes, like Kristen Cole at the wedding feast, and
Yep.
obviously the big one is Rhaenys and her at the dragon pit, and whatever the hell that was.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Definitely not. And I just think this whole thing came from a place of holy shit, we gotta make these people who, the target audience for Game of Thrones was like everyone,
Yeah.
like D&D said, the NFL players and
Yeah.
the soccer moms and stuff like that, which is not, you don't have to be elitist about it, but you're catering to you can trust your audience. Once again,
Mhm.
they now with House of the Dragon season one, the main criticisms were those scenes that they invented, the big spectacle things that were
Yep.
really unnecessary. Because if you cut out the rainy scene at the end, you have a perfect ending of Aegon raising the sword, and it's the last shot of him in season one. That would have been perfect. We could have
Yep.
assumed that Rhaenys escaped. Obviously, we still would have complained a little bit about that because how did you make
How
that
this
happen?
happened, but
But
you
still, it
know.
would have been way better than what we got because you gotta be really careful. One of the main themes of A Song of Ice and Fire, at least to me, the way I interpret Martin's work is, it's very important to have the anti-war thing.
Yep. It's a big one.
Show how brutal and how terrible war is, and to then make Rainey's kill those innocent people, and you play badass music over it, and it's supposed to be this badass scene. It's
Yep.
just not the way to go about it, in my opinion. And
I'm 100% agree.
I hope going forward we're gonna have way less uh, of that.
Yeah. I mean, I am 100% agree with you on that. And something I kind of thought of as we were talking about Game of Thrones, like I talked about, so with House of the Dragon, again, I think 90% of it was pretty good. It was this stuff, the stuff that sticks with you. That's
Mm.
kind of the problem for
The
me.
landing.
Yeah, it's you can have a great episode. Like I remember because when I was reviewing these, I would be writing down notes for each individual like scene, and I'd be sitting here going, "Wow, this is a really good episode. I really like the direction." And then we finish it, and it's like very questionable. Like you mentioned the Joffrey stuff. You mentioned Rhaenys. For me, I was someone that didn't like the way the Stepstones was handled with like Damon's
Oh
character
yeah,
and all of that. It
forgot about
it
that.
reminded me a lot of Game of Thrones
Oh
with
yeah.
Jon Snow. So that wasn't, great. But, I wanted to see more. I have a bias. I wanted to see more of the Stepstones with Corlys and the Velaryons, but
Mm.
we didn't really get that. I mean, again, there wasn't given with 10 episodes enough time to really cover that. But looking at Game of Thrones, something that I think really resonated with me was season 6. I think for the most part, the casual fans of Game of Thrones look back on that season and say, this was still a good season.
Mm.
And I have personal experience because my friends, when they watched it, they were like, all of season 6 was kind of mediocre filler, wasn't great, and then you end on two very high notes. Like, you have the Battle of the Bastards, you have Cersei blowing up the Sept. It's something where I feel like Game of Thrones season 6 is actually the opposite, where it's like it did all of the little things wrong. It didn't do a lot of that character building, things that House Dragon did really well, but it was able to, for the at least the casual fan base, stick the landing.
Hmm.
It had the good ending to leave you on a really good note. That's something that I think House of the Dragon, like, it kind of struggled with at times, and hopefully that's something that they can do better in the future seasons.
Yeah, well, now they only have to adapt. And, you mentioned the Battle of the Bastards. To me, that episode, even though it's beautiful to look at, doesn't really make that much sense. That much
Yeah.
sense, it's just something that's never been done on TV, and that is very, very good. A great achievement by the people who made the series. But just by looking at the story, it didn't make sense at all. And everything Cersei did never mattered because the people were
Yep.
they never went against her. So what I hope is gonna happen in House of the Dragon season 2 is that they have the battles laid out. They don't have to invent crazy stuff like that. You can
Yep.
build around that, and from what I've heard, I'm not gonna go into it. I'm not that much of a leaker, but from what I've heard, we're looking at a very slow, very very well structured season with a few things that I'm not too sure about. But the overall thing, which had me worried, 8 episodes, oh my god, less content, might actually work in favor of the story. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah, I think another thing that we haven't really touched on too much is that there is bad, but there's also like this layer of just we don't know. Again, I don't, because I haven't looked at any of the leaks or anything. How are they going to go with certain plot lines that they established in season 1? I think one that comes to my head immediately that I used to say was a bad, a negative. I'm kind of trying to keep my mind open to what they're trying to do with Lanor. Like,
Hmm.
how is that plot going to be resolved? So I can't say it's a bad thing yet, because I don't know how they're going to resolve it.
Same.
And I think things like that, and there's also things going forward that Ryan Condal will have to try and figure out. So, just for instance, there's a character Nettles, and that whole. It'll be interesting to see the way they do that, because we still in Fire and Blood. There's multiple ways that could have happened, and book readers will understand what I'm talking about. But yeah,
Yeah, about season 2 in general, it has a lot of it has to go to work.
yes,
There are a few things that I would personally want to see handled better. The big one is House Velaryon in general. That is a big thing. Corlys, the actor who plays him, has so much fucking class, and you barely use him. Whenever
yep,
you had scenes with Corlys and Rhaenys, what they did most of the time was talking about the damn Iron Throne, about Rhaenys not becoming queen, and while that
yep.
is key and vital and all that, at some point you have to really, make us interested in these characters apart from the throne or their own ambition. With Corlys, there was opportunity, and I said that countless times on this channel, to make us, to show us more about the world. The guy has seen it all. He's been everywhere, all around the world, and you could have really explored lore and world building there. And with Rhaenys, she was or still is one of my favorite characters in the story. But in House of the Dragon, I feel she's been done the dirtiest so far. And once again,
Yeah,
it's a great
yep.
actress, and I don't think we are gonna have that much time to even that out in season 2. Um, so those are things that I'm really interested in for season 2. Will we see more Velaryon? Will we see more scenes that are centered around Corlys, not the Iron Throne and his wife, but the character himself? And that is something that I think with by adding the many places that we're gonna see, the Vale, Winterfell, what else will we see? Harrenhal again.
Yep,
By doing
Riverlands.
that, it becomes a story that has multiple storylines once again, and that can only benefit the show overall because you have minor characters coming in and they interact with each other, and it just makes for a better story. And
I
yeah,
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the weirdest thing is they were planning on making a Corliss show, but like we didn't develop him in season one
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
which is what is so jarring.
I,
I don't
it's
understand
baffling.
it.
It's baffling to me because if you're developing a Corliss show, you definitely will want to make people care about Corliss. And sure, I mean, I care about Corliss, but I know about Corliss, and I knew about Corliss prior to the show. If you're some like that's something that is very important. Like people, like most of the audience is not familiar with the lore and all the the small details. So you have to make them care about a Corliss show, and that just didn't happen. And it's a shame. And I hope we get. I'm sure we get more, but it's a shame that it didn't happen in season one. And once again, I guess that is also due to them have only having 10 episodes. Like
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree, but I think something else just to put onto that. Think about the casual fan base. No one really would know who House Velaryon even is. They're
yeah,
not, by the time of the main story, they're a much more minor house at this point. So it is
because
something
we
where it's
didn't
like,
get Orain Waters,
that's
the
true.
absolute
That's true.
fucking unit.
The Chad.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a yeah, there's a whole thing we could say about missed characters in the show, but
Yeah, we are not
yeah,
gonna go into that today. Holy
we'll
no.
be here all
Holy
day.
no. Hell no.
Um, but yeah, that so I think that kind of leads us to one of our other, I guess, bads that we didn't really talk too much about, but the time skips, I think it's something that I think it hurt House Velaryon the most because there's a
Oh yeah.
lot of stuff that, the Stepstones is not this like quick period like it is in the show. In the
Mm.
books, it's much more of a drawn out conflict. I think it's George's really his attempt to one show us, okay, why are Damon and Corliss such good military advisors? Why is that an advantage for Team Black versus Team Green? And so we missed out on a lot of that. And I think that was a massive role when you have just massive jumps in time where Rhaenyra and Harwin's relationship is something that's pivotal to
Mm.
the story, and it's something that pretty much happened off screen. Like we kind of jump back in, and it's they have again the two actors they had really good chemistry in my opinion. It's a
Yeah.
shame we didn't see more of it.
Yeah, the time jump, and I think in the context of the show, with the limitations that they had, it was done as good as they could. But
Yeah,
there's this stuff that we've all been dying to see, that we were all there for, and then once again it ties into that thing of like them not trusting their audience enough, where they're like, okay, the audience would be there for actually 13 episodes, and 3 episodes of them we spend a lot of time at court with Harwin and Rhaenyra and slower scenes, and you know that was again, that's a very valuable lesson for future
of
shows
course.
and seasons. And yeah, talking about future seasons, let's talk about season two. Um, what are you most excited for?
I think for me, I would lean towards. I really am excited to see again without getting into too much spoilers, but I think Damon's plot in Harrenhal. There's going to be some stuff with the Blackwoods and Brackens
Hmm.
that'll be really cool. That's probably my favorite aspect of it. The other thing I'm really looking forward to is Rhaenyra's character as a whole.
Hmm.
I am someone that I wish they would have gone a bit further with her character, showing kind of her darker sides, some of her flaws. Whereas in the first season, she really did come off a lot like Dany in the early seasons. I wish they had gone into a little bit more of what she is in Fire and Blood, because that's why she is my favorite character, or not my favorite character, but she's like my favorite Targaryen because she's so complex in the way she makes decisions and things. That's just something we really didn't see a lot of in the first season. So I hope they really lean into, okay, because of Luke's death, how is that going to impact her? How is that going to work with her decision making and things of that nature?
You could make that argument for both Allison and Rhaenyra, and I've seen a lot of people being pretty pissed about them being kind of whitewashed. I don't think they're entirely whitewashed, but definitely they're a lesser version of the characters in that regard, that they're not too much out there. And I think that that might still come, and it would make
Yeah,
sense for a television show to show them shifting into those, or becoming those characters slowly and over the course of the war and the seasons. And while it would have been nice to see Alicent really pushing Aegon and really, yeah, pushing her son against for the throne in the show. I think I would also enjoy it if I see it over the course of 3 seasons, and stuff happens that definitely would make sense for that turn to come slowly.
Yeah, I agree. mean, I think Alicent for me, I would disagree with the idea that she's like a whitewash because for me personally, through the first like 8 episodes, I think she's like up there with Viserys on best character arcs.
Mm.
I think for me, the struggle I have is it's episode like 9 specifically is some of her motivations change, but I understand why they did so because I don't think they wanted to fully go down the Alicent like villain specifically arc yet. And I think that, it makes sense in the context of the overarching like show and the lifespan. You want to have more of that growth as you go through the
Yeah.
series. But it is something that I think as a book reader, I have my version of how I interpret the greens. So, I'll just leave it at that.
Mm. Kind
Notice
of
the green
thing.
lights, guys.
Had to come. Um, yeah, I like her character a lot. I think they've done a beautiful job with that, and I don't think that I would have preferred the evil stepmother kind of thing. Yeah, other things that I look forward to in season 2 are definitely obviously the battle at Rook's Rest. That is gonna be
That'll be
very
a good one.
cool. That's a good one. It kind of sets it changes the dynamics of the show. And obviously the other big one is Blood and Cheese.
Hmm.
And just how they uh go with Damon from here. Because I think right now he lacks a lot of what makes him a great character in terms of him being good. Like to
Yep.
me, he's a straight up villain right now.
I
He's not
100%
he's
agree.
not any better than Aemond at all. I think he's worse than Aemond right now.
Oh, yeah. I would 100% back that up. And that's something we didn't really talk that much on in this video, but he is a character that feels like the direction at times was just off. I
Mm.
think he is one of those characters that kind of lacked what some of the other characters were getting, where like you could really see why would they make this decision that seems kind of horrible.
Mm.
It seems like Damon, it's just like he just did it to do it. I don't know. That is something I didn't particularly like. But yeah, I think what I'm really interested to see is how fans react to certain events.
Mm.
Like how do they view things? Do they think this is justified or do they think this event is not justified?
Mm.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see what the fans think on that.
Apart from that, it's gonna be really nice to see Winterfell again, and the Whale, and Driftmark again, and Harrenhal, and Essos. It's adding a Game of Thrones feel, where you had
Yep.
multiple places, locations, and it just makes for a bigger and cooler story.
Yeah, just expanding the world. I
Yeah,
mean, that's basically what we're doing. Because like the first seasons, like we really only had like 2 or 3 major places we went
yeah.
to.
King's
So
Landing, Driftmark, High Tide, and Dragonstone.
yeah, Dragonstone
Yeah.
would be like the other one.
I mean, we saw Harrenhal for
We
like 3 minutes, but
we saw Storm's End a little bit.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. I take back everything I said. That was very very rewarding. Yeah, I've
It
been waiting
was,
for that shit
of
for quite
course.
some time. Um, but yeah, to kind of wrap this whole thing up, I think House of the Dragon is a very good show so far. It does have flaws that are not groundbreaking at this point, but definitely have me a bit worried about the future of the show. But the fact that they made me care so much and really reignited my passion for this whole universe, is because obviously we are all waiting for Winds of Winter, and the years keep on coming and going, and we still don't have that book. It really reignited something, and yeah, I think it's way better than Game of Thrones season 5 to season 8. So I trust them. I really do. They've earned my trust now, and I think that going forward, again, they have learned their lesson about adding stuff just for the sake of being shocking or whatever, because now they can adapt all of that, so they should really work around that. And from what I've heard, I won't spoil anything. We're looking at a very, very slow season 2, and I love that. I love that.
We love it.
That is my that is my that is the way I like it.
Yeah. I think having just something new to talk about. I mean,
Hmm.
there's just, after you come off of this last season of Game of Thrones, it just felt like the space died. Like we just had a break where it was the only things you were seeing in this like space was rewriting the seasons or why Game of Thrones was bad or and now it's like okay, we have a bunch of people that are again, passionate about this world and we have some really, great artistic visions for these characters that we didn't see in the books. Viserys again is the big one.
Hmm.
So, it just feels like, House of the Dragon is it's just someone else's opinion on these stories and their, take on them because Fire and Blood can be very loose-ended on how you interpret a story.
And I have to say that as well. I don't think Fire and Blood is anywhere near a Song of Ice and Fire in terms of quality. So there is already like the way I really appreciate Ryan Condal's work.
I agree.
I really think that what he has done with what he had to deal with, 10 episodes and you have to introduce everything. And I think he's done a phenomenal job. And just by the fact that they didn't go for an all out war kind of story and that I really believe that they care about the characters, I think that they can definitely do better in the future with Rainy Stamen and stuff like that. I trust them and I think it's gonna be it's gonna be good. They have my trust for
What's I
now.
mean, what's great about this is that, they're learning all of these things now
Hmm.
so that, when they go to do future shows, right? We've heard Dunk and Egg.
Oh my
You've
god.
already ironed out some of the issues you have. You know that you can write a
See,
story
see
that doesn't need
that.
all these big things. You can just
See.
have great written characters. I know that was going to pique your interest
Oh
when I
wow.
brought that
Well,
up.
Duncan Egg, I'm gonna be very, very nitpicky. Like,
Oh boy.
oh my god, yeah, yeah. You have to get that one right. That is the one, a Song of Ice and story, a Song of Ice and Fire story that is the closest to my heart, and
Yep.
I will be very loud and vocal if it's.
Well, to be fair, it's more outlined. So like you have
Hmm.
everything there, you know? Now, if George doesn't, finish any of those, then you kind of run into a kind of a roadblock. But
No, no.
I don't mean like roadblock as in like you're not given everything. Like, you
True,
you will have to start,
true,
making up your own stuff. But I
true,
agree that
but
they
it's
can do it.
very easy for the type of simple and
Yeah,
laid back show that this would be, and you have Summerhall as an ending, and yeah, but it's a topic for another day. It's a topic for
you're right.
another day. Let's
You're
wrap
right.
this one up. Thank you so much for joining me today, Eric. Always a
No
pleasure
problem.
doing these videos with you. Definitely go and subscribe to the Grease Goblins channel.
And
And
subscribe right in this channel right now because we
thank
didn't
you.
know no shouts. You liked the content, you did, so just subscribe.
Thanks, bro. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Take care and see us later.